Well, welcome to It's a New Day. I'm your host, Dr. Keith, and I tell you, I got three beautiful ladies on with me. These three powerful, beautiful ladies on. I'm going to introduce them to you in just a moment, but we're excited to have you back on this Thursday afternoon. This is the day the Lord has made. We're rejoicing. We're glad in it. It's just another day. And we have a real exciting topic today, something that's precious to all of us. We want to talk about so much to discuss. So little time, but so much to discuss. If by chance there's something said today, you don't like it, you think it's wrong, my email is down there somewhere. My information, you can contact me. It is the opinion of It's a New Day radio show that is not WCEG's opinion. It's mine and my guest, if you have any problems. But I said that to say this way. One person contacted me, Weeping Fertilizer, said something to me, and I responded, and it was a little abrupt when I responded. The person came back and said, Bishop, why were you so abrupt? I said, because you gave me an abrupt statement. If you make an abrupt statement, I may bring you back an abrupt answer. So, it's just what happens, and I'm going to ask Dr. Karen, this is a good way to really go right into Dr. Karen. Dr. Holly, I'm going to go right to you because this just popped in my mind. Isn't it very easy that when you're talking to somebody that you mirror their personality or you mirror what they write to you? How does that occur? What happens when that happens?
Well, one thing that happens is that we are influenced by what we hear. And so many times we try to duplicate it. And the way that we duplicate it is by affirming what we heard. And so we send that right back to the person. And so we have to be very careful about that, because if you don't want it duplicated, then maybe it shouldn't be said in the first place or said that way.
It's you know what, I got so much to talk about when it comes to that, because I am, and Dr. Michelle Robinson, my dear sister, that's my sister, y'all, from another mother. We talk just every day. I'm involved with her ministry, but she's been able to see how I am with people. I love people, but I don't like how people operate. That's a problem for me. I love people, but I don't like how people operate. People are too fast. I got a call just a minute ago for somebody we know, Dr. Michelle, and I was cautious on the phone, because in these times, when people call you and they're asking you certain questions, you look at the phone and say, okay, is this a trick question, or is somebody else listening? You trying to set me up? What's going on here? And then the person finally got the phone, and I looked at the phone and said, was that you just don't know. Times are different. Times are different. What I want to go back to when I was with my great grandmother and you could borrow a cup of sugar. Where are those times? Will we go back to those times? Y'all all looking at me. Let me welcome my guest, y'all. Let me welcome my co-host. My co-host, all the way from Louisiana. She's the country girl. I call her country girl, but I tell you what, she's a preaching machine. All the way from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My dear sister, my friend, Dr. Michelle Robinson. What's up, my sis?
Doing good over here in this city. Grace and peace to every last one of you women of God, Coach Betty and Coach Karen.
Yes.
We're going to have a good time today. I just want ears to be open to listen and respond back, because I believe that it's going to hit home run with the people that need this word, that this topic what we're going to be talking about today, because I believe that there's a lot of grieving that is going on, and I think there's going to be a lot of healing that is going to take place.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. You on the move. You got something going on after this, and then I know you got your conference coming up in Atlanta, the 20th, 1st, and 22nd. Everybody, we're going to meet in Atlanta at the Impact Studios and Conference Center there, 1600 Agape Way. I'm looking forward to being there with you. Thank you so much for having me be there. My co-host, this woman, God's from Detroit, Michigan. She now hails from California. She's a powerhouse coach. I mean, she's just got it going on. Let's welcome Miss, let me see. I was going to say Dr. Coach Bim, Coach Kim. I got tongue-tied. Coach, I can't get it out. Coach,
get it out.
What's happening? Oh my God.
Coach Kim Betty is my name. However, I am being strongly encouraged to go back to school and get my doctorate. So with all as my best friend says, the beauty's in the mistake. So I'm going to be looking into that. Happy to be here. The topic is one that weighs heavy on all of our hearts. The intent is to support. So I'm excited about that. And very interesting. You didn't ask me about feedback. Maybe we can talk offline about that if you want to.
Well, no, if you got it, if you have some, you certainly can bring it. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, sis. Come on, let's do what you got. What you got?
I know. Then they can get a flavor of how the coach operates. No, I just think feedback is a gift. And I used to teach a class.
Feedback is a gift?
Feedback is a gift. When someone gets the courage, because so often people don't tell you what's on their mind. And unfortunately, only it's the criticism that typically comes out. So we get defensive in some ways, or like you say, how it's delivered. But the issue really is, it was interesting. I taught a course on feedback back in corporate America, and we taught not to teach people how to give it, how to receive it. Because the real deal is, if you wait for people to ever deliver it right, you're gonna be waiting forever. Probably 1% of people deliver the feedback in the best light. And so if we're not careful, people will be giving us the feedback and we'll miss it because the deliverer sucks at giving it. So I always say, still sift through and try to find something constructive in it, even when it's delivered, not wrapped properly. Your kid gives you a Christmas gift and it's wrapped all funky. You can still open it and see if it's a pair of socks or something that you can. That's just my thought.
Okay. All right. She's all the way from, I'm not even responding to that. I and about that, because we'd have been back and forth with that one. She's all the way from Dallas, Texas, great woman of God, a preacher, a college professor, a clinical psychologist. I saw the award. I saw the degrees on the wall. I've seen her talk to people. I've heard her. She's gifted it, and I thank God for her joining our team. Let's welcome Dr. Karen Holly. Dr. Karen?
Yes. Thank you for welcoming me.
Well, welcome. We thank you so much. It's always that my father and grandfather used to say, the smarter you are is based on who you have around you.
Mm-hmm.
Smarter based on the company you keep. So that's why I got all these smart people on this show to keep me looking and feeling smart. So let me start with you. You had a letter to come in about relationships.
I did.
What was it about?
Let me read it to you. It says, "Dear Dr. Holly, I think I've gotten over my relationship of 7 years. We broke up 4 months ago. I tried dating him again. It didn't work. I am wondering, how do I know if I'm really ready to move on?" And it's signed Lonely. That's a good one, huh?
That's a real good one, because
it's one that a lot of us get in and out of, and we have that. And we need some tips and some tools of what we do and how do we know if we're ready to move on. So, of course, I'm the alliteration queen.
What you got? Okay. How we know
So
we're ready to move on?
7 S's for you. And 7, because it's a number of completion. And that's where I want her to be in this cycle when we're done. I say that if you can speak about the person without pain, then you're ready to move on. If pain is still involved in it, you're not ready to go anywhere, because you're getting ready to inflict pain and carry pain along with you. And so the next person is going to experience your previous pain. So make sure that you can speak without being in the middle of that. If you're still talking about your heartache, the headache, and all that they did, you're not ready. You're still hurt. And then I say that you need to have some settled emotions. You need to be out of anger and frustration. If you're still angry and vengeance and vengeful, then you want to get out of that. If you're vindictive in any way, you're still in the relationship. And then stuck in the story, because sometimes people get stuck in the middle of whatever that story is. And so what they do is they repeat it. And I know you've heard it. People repeat that over and over again. They got to tell you how they were wrong. And so if you're still stuck in the middle of that and you still need to tell everybody about what the person did to you, then you're just stuck and not ready. You're still justifying and explaining. And that's just a part of being stuck. And then I say, stop surfing and searching. So if you're still on the internet or driving by their house, if you're searching or surfing, you're not over them. You're still involved. And so you want to know what they're doing now. You haven't moved on. And then I say, if you have this, and some people have this quite a bit, they want to show them who I am today. If you still are about showing somebody who you are and who you've become, that relationship is ended. You are not supposed to be still stuck in trying to, elevate yourself and let them know that you missed it. Here I am. You should have stayed with me. All of that, that's still in it. And then number 6, if you are sabotaging them in any way, then you're still in it. Or if you're sabotaging yourself, that's self-destructive. And so if it's any sabotage, if you are a saboteur in any form, then you're still stuck. And finally, I said, if you have done it right, then you are ready to stand and rebrand. And so you are ready to go on into who you are now, and you are prepared to move ahead. So if you've done all of those things, then you're ready to go on. But if any of them, if you're going or vacillating between them, you're not ready yet. So get healed, get ready, get right, and then you'll be able to go on.
Wow. Any comments? Look at Dr. See y'all, Dr. Michelle, I see that smirk on your face. Come on with it.
What I want to say, Dr. Karen,
Yes, ma'am.
pain plays game.
Yes. Yes.
When you're in pain, you play games.
Always.
And it plays manipulation also.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
manipulation could be good and it could be bad. It's
Mm-hmm.
good manipulation, then it's bad manipulation. But if you're gonna go on and not return back, I always say with all my ex that I have dated from my past that my transmission gone out and it won't go back in reverse. So
Praise the Lord.
So
praise the Lord.
I mean, I have to say it so simple like that, because one thing about when you're driving a car, if the transmission go out, you need to rebuild the motor.
Yes.
Or you get rid of the motor. The transmission.
Yes.
Either you rebuild it or either you get a new one.
Right.
So I just believe that, you can be in love and you can be in pain. You still can walk away. But as you walk away, no contact, no text, no call. And it's gradually going to leave, because concerning with a woman, the difference between a woman and a man, a woman loves harder than a man. You understand what I'm saying? A woman loves harder.
I don't think that's true, but that's okay. I'll let you have that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be on at 7:00, so I think some of y'all need to just tune in. We're gonna talk about that.
Okay, good.
The reason,
to come.
Yes, it is. And so, I mean, we both love, but at the same time, we both get in pain, because of the love. It depends on our heart and how deep our heart is in the, in the relationship. And that's all I want to put out there.
Any comments from Coach Betty?
Yeah, I mean, you want to guard your heart not to be bitter. That's
right.
really what you're guarding, because the opposite of that is to say, I never want to love again, ever. And you can get in that mode while you're doing all those things that Dr. Karen talked about. And you have to look at yourself and say, really? I think I had shared with Dr. Keith that my motto is I coach in work, life, and love too. And Dr. Keith said, why in love too? Like, is it an afterthought? And I'm like, by my clients, often so. Many of them are like, I'm not focused on love. I am not. I had one man client say, I do 7 areas of life, anything from financial and vocational and spiritual and different areas. And he didn't want to do relational. And he got all the way in his car, turned around and came back and said, Dr. Karen, oh, okay, I do want to work on relationships too. And that was the one he wanted to work on the most. So we have to guard ourselves of bitter. And then, like you say, it plays out in weird ways. We're stalking people, saying, I don't care about him anymore.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Right.
And thank you so much for that, Coach. That's absolutely right. And what Dr. Michelle was saying as well, when we start talking about manipulation we know is a form of abuse. And so once you start getting involved in that, then you're ready to abuse somebody.
Mm.
You have to manipulate.
Mm.
That's one of the steps that we talk about when we start talking about domestic violence. Manipulation is a part of domestic violence. And so when we start to see someone is manipulative, it is time to run. In whatever form that is, it's time to run. Because all the next step is another form of abuse.
Like
And
you
so
have to ask the question.
to get it scalpel. Yes.
If you gotta ask.
That's good. That's good. That's good. That's another subject. We got to do that. This happens to be Domestic Violence Month. On the 20th, I think it's on 20th, our next show. We're gonna have a young lady on who has a domestic violence clinic, and she helps people across the country. I really hope Dr. Karen, you can be with, because I want her to be able to talk about some of the things that she's been through and some of the things that she's come out of when it comes to domestic violence. Okay, now grief, big word. Small word, small letters, but big word. Grife. Is grief an emotion or feeling? What really is grief? And is grief just attached to death? When you talk about grief, you talk about how to cope with it. When our author, Dr. Smith, should be joining us in just a moment. But when we talk about this, we talk about something, especially in this season now. Dr. Karen and I talked about this maybe last year because of COVID. And so many people dying. And I want to ask this question too, that somebody sent me a question and said, why is it that when a person has been married to someone 20, 25 years, that they grieve themselves to death and they go right after? That's something I want you to think about and really address, Dr. Karen, when we get a chance to. So when we talk about grief, we talk about this, how do you deal with it? I mean, the author's going to come and give us some points of his book, but I don't want to skip this topic, because I think it's very important. And Dr. Michelle started by saying, grief has to be healed. It's got to be a part of the healing process. It's a process of healing. And what's the first process? I mean, you can, when people call, sometimes you have death in your family. We use that scripture, earth has no sorrow, that heaven cannot heal. Is that really the case? Is that really true? I mean, I really want to delve into this. What do y'all think about that?
About grief and healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that ultimately the final step of grief is acceptance, but many people never get there. They never make it that far.
Wait a minute, hold on a second. So you're saying the final step?
Yes.
There's so many more steps before, is what you're saying.
5. There are 5 steps, and so the final one is acceptance. And so if you get there, then that's fabulous. But many people will never achieve that. And so we know that. So you are taking them, and many times they're going in and out of those stages. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a great book about that. And so she talks about those 5 stages of grief. And so we still practice much of that today. But
come on, don't just throw it out there and not tell us.
Okay. Well, the 5 stages, because they go differently from time to time, depending on who you're talking to and talking about. But anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance.
Okay, so let's jump right into the word bargaining. What do you mean by bargaining? Because that's
bargaining means that if God had just given them a little bit more time until my child graduates from high school. This is the dad. The dad died. So now, why didn't God just let it wait? It was just 2 more years. And so you're trying to bargain that out and think through that piece with God. Many times. Yeah. You just don't get it. And then there are those people that stay angry. We've seen many of them stay angry for years. Their situation has changed, circumstances have changed for them. They've gone from being financially secure to being in poverty. And so those kind of things make you very angry about the person dying. And then sometimes we're angry because we felt like they could have lived. They had a choice as to whether they wanted to be here or not. And I'm not talking about the suicides, because that's a whole different story. Right. But I'm just talking about just people dying. Sometimes we feel like just their death, they could have held on, and they should have. So I'm angry with them. And then now I've got to go through life without them and in a struggle. So those kind of things.
Jesus. So all that you said, I'm shaking my head because acceptance is the last of the five.
Mhm.
What should acceptance be first?
Because the acceptance is the hardest piece. It's the most difficult piece. It means that I reconcile within me that I understand what happened. I understand it now. Not that I don't, not that I like it, but I understand it. And so once we can get to an understanding and that I can keep moving on.
Right. I don't want to keep this all biblical.
Can't move on.
I don't want to keep it so biblical, but when you think about death, and I don't want, I'm trying to wait to see if Dr. Michelle allowed me to talk about it, because just recently she had a major situation in her life, and we were praying for something. And I said to her a week before it happened, I said, well, how do you think they praying? We could be praying, you and I could be praying for them to be okay, be healed, be strong, be living. But what is the other person on the other end praying?
Mhm.
And we're praying to God, they're praying to God. Who's God going to answer? If I'm praying, Lord, I'm tired, I want to go, you praying stay, then who is God going to say, okay, let me just deal with this? So you have to, it looks like that acceptance ought to be first, but I understand what you're saying. I had to, listen, I'm going to testify. I had to accept my mother. My mother, when she went on in 2019, I had to accept it. And I felt like I accepted first because I realized her desire was not to be laying in that bed with dementia and sick. That wasn't that's not the life she wanted to live. So I had to accept what I thought she wanted. And she wanted to not be in no pain and not struggle. So I had to accept that, even though I knew I was going to miss her, I was going to be frustrated, I was going to be mad, because that's your mama. Mama. So it's going to cause those things. But we really got to, I really want to understand, and I think Mr. Smith is coming on now with us, to understand how you cope with that. Because, sometimes I'm like, hey, why you go? Remember, I'm the child that my father died when I was 13. I can't tell you how many years that's been. And my first years of my life, I was concerned, well, was it me you left? Why'd you leave? I mean, what was the situation? But I had to learn how to cope with that person not being there. And let's welcome to the show. He's here. He's the man. He's got the book. He wrote the book. I got these guys on here, want to ask questions. The first question, let me have Dr. Karen. Dr. Karen, tell us the 5 stages of what she says, how to cope with grief. And Dr. Smith, you jump right in and take us from there.
Okay. I just mentioned the 5 stages from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and we just talked about anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so, but you're the expert, so I'm waiting on you.
She gonna do that.
Well, thank you everyone for having me, and I apologize for running late. Some people don't have a good sense of time. Some of my clients just kind of ran late today, so I apologize. I do agree. The things that you mentioned were all parts of what most people go through, if not all people. Now, when I wrote this, I don't call it a book, I call it a journal. It's actually the first of about a 30 journal volume. The next one comes out next week, and it's called The Coping Journal for Abandonment. And then following that would be divorce, abortion, pretty much anything you can name that is an issue in life. There would be a coping journal on it. I wrote the journal first by inspiration of God. And secondly, I wrote it because some years ago, 5 years ago, my wife died from an unexpected cancer. And she was in the best of health, very successful computer programmer, had no sicknesses, in the gym 3-4 times a week, gluten-free, ate healthy. She was probably 5'4" and maybe 120 pounds, soaking wet, and in very, very good shape. The short story, she came home one day, complained of being out of breath, and it kind of went downhill from there. Next thing we knew, we were going to the emergency room, and the doctor was bringing us the news that she was already in 4th stage cancer. And what they misdiagnosed as a chronic ear infection was actually 4th stage cancer. They gave her 6 months to live. She lived 4. In that period of time, that 4 months, I stopped everything to take care of her. Now, the challenge for me was a lot of things. First of all, being a pastor and having a wife who was a born again Christian, filled with the Holy Spirit. And most people that met her knew that she was very committed to God. Having to get past the mental thoughts in my mind. Why, Lord? This person who never drank so much as a glass of wine, smoked a cigarette, any of that thing, dies from cancer that we have no idea she had until it's in its 4th stages. Never complained of any pains, never anything. For me, I had to cope with living with her and watching her die for 4 years. We, yes, made affirmations, we talked faith, we read Bible, we did the typical things that most born again Christians do. But we ultimately left it in the hands of God and his will. But it doesn't mean because you put something in the hands of God and his will that you don't have to still cope. And for me, I had to cope. Now, everybody copes differently. And that's why I don't like church folk, because we tell people things that are not true. We tell them things like, oh, don't worry about it. You're in a better place. You don't know that. We tell them things like, all you have to do is the Bible says to be absent in the body to be present in the Lord. Not necessarily. And we say all these other cliches things that truthfully, for most people that are dealing with somebody who's dying, doesn't mean a hill of beans. Because at the time that you're hurting, and I'm speaking from experience, and you're going through and all this cliche stuff that church folk tell you and say to you in good intentions, they mean well. But what they miss is that what a person who's coping with a death is dealing with at the time is so personal that you cannot possibly tell them how to cope. And that's why I didn't name this little booklet, How to Deal with Coping with Death, because you can't tell a person how to cope. And you shouldn't try to tell a person how to cope. And you shouldn't tell a person, don't worry about it, it's going to be okay. You have to let them manage and deal with it the way that they know how. This booklet is only a guide. It's only a journal. In the content of the book, I'll tell you a little bit about what's in it. It first tells people how to use the book, because there is a way that God gave to me for these people to use this journal. I said book, I meant journal. It offers to them opportunities to understand how to process their grieving, but it doesn't tell them how to deal with everything that they're dealing with. It's only designed to help them have a structured thing in place to help them get through it. It has in it a word of encouragement that came directly from me. It tells them how to cope with death. But I say that advisedly because it also tells them that no one can tell you how to cope with what you're going through. It has a daily grief confessions. God gave me specific biblical confessions that they can make every day that's designed to help them get through coping. Now, it also gets into exercises, because one of the things that is in the journal is they have to take the time to write a letter to that person that died. By the way, there is a place in the front of it where you put the picture of the person as well as the date of their birth and the date of their death. But one of the things that it asks them to do is to take the time to write a letter, and it has a space in the journal for them to write that letter. In addition to that, we asked them to list the good times that they had with the person. I only put like 20, there may be more than 20 lines of good times they had. Then we asked them to list funny moments, the thing that made them laugh, the joyful things. And we only have about 20 spaces for that, but they can write as many as they want. The next page of it has things that they wish that they would have had a chance to say, but they did not have a chance to say to them. And they write those things in there as well. And then things that they learned from this person, take the time to reflect. What did you learn from the person? And then there are 30 pages, actually 1 pages, where each day I ask them to wake up or do it before they go to bed and write down their thoughts, how they are feeling, unfiltered. If you feel like I hate God today, write it. If you feel like I don't understand why God was so mean to me and it doesn't seem fair, and I'm going to stop going to church because God doesn't seem like he cared for me, write it. That's what this is for. And then in the latter part of it, I put information about how to cope with this death thing long term. And finally, I give them resources in this book, 800 numbers that they can call if they need additional care. I even have a place in here for pet loss bereavement. Don't ask me about that. Seeing as I'm not an animal lover, but I was being sensitive to animal lovers. So the journal and the other subsequent journals that will come after it are simply designed to assist in their process of getting past whatever it is at that time they're getting past.
Okay.
So,
One of the things, Dr. Smith, and I hear you talking about, I heard you talking about the letter that they write to the loved one. I use it a lot in my practice as well, but I find that that's a real difficult piece for a lot of people. Can you share with me why you believe it's so necessary to have it, yet it becomes a difficult piece for them to do?
Sure. In my opinion, part of healing from anything is being totally honest and being able to express exactly how you feel. We oftentimes are prohibited from sharing what we really feel in the fear that we're going to be condemned, we're going to be talked about, somebody's going to look at us the wrong way. So we won't talk about it. But I found that if you write a letter, and I encourage people, when you use a journal, get in your quiet place, not around family, not around, close off in your bedroom, because this is very personal. And we share with them, you write because you want to pour out your heart. You want to say to them what you couldn't say. I mean, there's so many things that I wanted to say. I was with my wife when she died. And there were so many things that I wanted to say to her that I could not say to her because she was already. For me, writing letters to her, and if you have my Facebook page, if you go on my page and actually go on her page is still up. Every year on her birthday, I write to her still. When she passed for the first 30 days, I wrote to her. And it is difficult. It is difficult because sometimes you don't know what to say. But if you're like me, when you start writing, if you can get that first sentence out, the rest of it is downhill.
Okay, thank you. The question came up, what's the name of the book and where can people get the book? That just popped a couple.
It's called The Grief. Oh, you can't say, can you?
No, can't see it.
There we go. Grief. There we go. Grief coping. I think my background is messing up.
It is.
It's called Grief Coping Journal. You can get it off of Amazon.com. Just type in my name, Dr. Willard Smith, and the book will pop up and just order the book.
Grief Coping Journal. Okay, so what he just did for us, Dr. Holly, was really the journal is really something that's structured to go through the process. It's like a process, and not something where you just say, okay, I'm over it, I keep on moving, but it's a process. And that's what you said a few minutes ago about those 5 stages. But in the midst of that, the letter, which I felt some kind of way when you said that letter right to that person. I kind of got a little choked up here. I was like, that's going to be a difficult process. Dr. Holly, as a clinical psychologist, how's that going to feel with me writing to that person? How's that going to talk about that for me just a little bit?
Sometimes in several of my patients, they have a lot of emotion about that. They are not wanting, part of with grief is that some people don't want to have closure. And so they don't want to close it out. The letter is kind of like a closure piece. And so I see how you're using it. And I think that's absolutely brilliant, the way that you're doing it, because you're taking them on through the process of all of that. So they've done some other things before they get to the letter. And so maybe that helps them along the way. But they don't want many times the closure of that, and then they don't want to feel that. Some people feel that that's real morbid to be writing to somebody. They're not here. There's no response. What's the end product? And so, that's just kind of what I've experienced with it. And so I pretty much like that. And then I try to go on to some kind of memorial piece that may be a little easier.
I agree. I totally agree with you. And again, as I said earlier, we encourage them to go through this. Anything that's in it is optional because, as I said earlier, people do grieve in different ways. This is just kind of an alternative for it. Now, one of the things that we hoped with the letter that would come to pass, because while you are writing to them, you're not writing for them. You're writing for you. And you're right. There are people who do not want to get closure from that. However, I have many degrees, but not in psychology, so I don't want to tell you how to do your job. However, I think that, writing it gives them an outlet. And it's not an absolute. Nothing in this journal is absolute. But it gives them, if they could do it, and I don't, this would be your line. You could answer this question. I don't know that it's healthy not to get closure. I mean, I've lost 3 people that are close to me over the last 10 years. My father first, my wife, and then my mother died last year. All 3 of them were extremely close to me. And I don't know that it's a good idea not to get closure. I mean, what's your take on that? Because that's a question.
Wait, before Dr. Karen, hold on a second.
Okay.
Dr. Michelle, you shook your head. Did you have something to say? I'm gonna get them in there.
I was just agreeing what Dr. Smith was saying. Sometimes you don't want to bring closure.
Yeah.
And that's where my question gonna go. Coach, what you got to say?
Yeah, and this will maybe frame it for you, Dr. Karen, and our expert with now when I say expert, I'm saying you've lived it. And what I love about it, since I am a coach, I'm all about practical application of the things we learn. And that could be at the pulpit or wherever we learn it and doing something with it. And to me, your beautiful coping journal says, this is what helped me.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And if it helped me, it might help you. And really, it mimics the entire, Christian funeral experience, because the obituary is really writing a letter, in essence, about that person. So it really does mimic what we intend those few days to do, to have people get in touch with it. And we talk about them and we remember them. The thing that I want to throw in the mix is, like, I have a client right now, a coaching client, and ironically, she just lost another family member. And similar to what Dr. Keith was sharing, she lost her parents early in life, her mom early. Then she lost her partner. Then she lost some people in COVID. I mean, grief after grief after grief. I almost want to tell her, go buy 5 of those books and do one for each one, because it really becomes a memory marker for your loved one. Also, it's interesting to me.
Okay, good. I'm glad you
Believe
said
it or not, there are people who have bought multiple for different reasons. So yeah.
Question comes up. 2 things. I got 2 questions come up. One, thank you online. Someone said that writing your thoughts on paper sometimes helps you. Let's thank you for that comment. The next thing was, when you talk about closure, closure, that's a big word. What really is closure, number one? And is there such thing as good or bad grief? So let's.
Well, I think the psychologist can answer better than me. But what I would like to say, as a part of what I said earlier, I don't really know that you ever, now that I think about it, I don't know that you ever truly get closure. I mean, while this journal type thing did help, my dad died in 1988. Ironically, they buried him on my birthday. So every year I have a birthday, I also have a memory of my dad. My wife's birthday obviously comes at the same time every year. So I'm reminded every year, of her. Now, the difference is, when those things happen, and my mom first happened, when those events came that reminded, it was a struggle. It's like the psychologist was saying, there were times the emotional things that she was speaking of, every single year, year after year after year after year, they came back, they kept coming back. And the level of intensity of the hurt and the pain did not change until I start coping with it. Now, when my birthday comes and I remember that my dad was buried on my birthday, that's all it is. There are no real emotions attached to it. Do I miss my father? Yes, but it's a memory. When my wife's birthday pops up, wherever it pops up, I look at it and there's no emotional attachment. There's no, I'm hurting, I'm painting. I got to go sit in the corner with a glass of wine and think about those things. That's not there. My mom died just last year, and I did this for my mom as well. Now, when I think about my mom, there's pictures all around of my mom. When I see her, there's no emotional attachment. I don't feel the need to cry now. I don't feel the need to call somebody and say, oh, I wish my mom would say I hate it. I don't feel the need to say, I don't want to look at another white dress because my mom always wore white. The emotional attachment and the level of intensity is not there. And I think just Sister Holly could probably answer a little bit better, but that.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I was thinking about that, Dr. Smith, as you were saying that there are different levels of intensity. So my father died when he was 57. So I had a hard time with that because I just thought he had so much more to do. And then a couple of years ago, my mother died. She was 91. I didn't struggle. I felt she had completed her cycle. She lived a beautiful life. So I felt differently. I was married and my husband died 7 weeks after we were married. That was traumatic, a trauma that I couldn't and had a long time trying to get over. So I think that there are different kinds and different intensities to it. There are people who can bring closure, but there are some other situations where it is much more difficult. So we have to figure out where we are and what closure looks like for that particular situation. It doesn't look the same for everybody. So it's a different kind of closure. But what we don't want people to be to get stuck in for years and years of not moving forward and not moving on, and to be reliving and replaying life cycles so that they are hindered in any way from being their best self, because they're still here. So we want them to be able to thrive and survive.
And that's the idea behind coping. I think the life coach can probably tell us, as you're sharing with people and you're coaching them going with life. I think one of the thesis of what you say in most cases is probably helping them to understand, regardless of what it is, you have to cope with it. And that's why the journal was so important to me, because so many times in all of the things I mentioned, whether it's divorce, death, or people not doing well in life, having financial issues, whatever, you can only survive those things if you cope with them. You have to cope. And all this little journey does is give a platform to start that process. How you end up in the end, whole different story. But you got to at least start it. And sometimes people don't know where to start, how to start, or even if they should start. So we wrote this journal to give them a springboard, to at least let's get it started. You know, I've seen people that their loved one die and they go to church, and you're thinking that they're crying because they're in the spirit. They're not crying because they're in the spirit. They're crying because they're hurting because they remember somebody died. A friend of ours, a dear friend and sister, had a death last week. Her nephew died. And she was telling me that her daughter, unfortunately died in the home. Her daughter came over to the house the other evening, who was really close to him, and went out to the chair where he sat in the backyard and cried her dear heart out, asking him the question as though he were there, why did you have to leave me? Sometimes people don't do that. And I'd like to think that all of the journals that I come out with over the next few months would lead a place where a person would deal with what they're feeling and not just skip over and let the church folk tell them words of, just words that kind of paste over what they're
Be
really.
strong. Hold on. You can make it.
Yeah. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. It's just, you know what I'm saying?
I'm the first one to say, cry. You want to
That's
cry?
what's coming to my mind.
Yeah. And they should. They
Right.
should.
Cry.
They should.
Get it out.
But you know what we tell them, don't cry. Don't cry, darling. Mom's gonna be all right. She's in a better place. She's looking down over us now.
But
She's
now
gonna
that's the context, Bishop. When you keep saying, you said that twice, so you that's controversial because you're saying that we didn't been with these people. They've been going to church. They have a relationship with God, and we know they with God. But you're saying that may not be true. Why is that the case, Bishop?
because nobody but God has the right to judge in the finality of who goes where. It doesn't matter how good you are on the outside. It doesn't matter how good you are in the presence of people. What really matters in the end is what God thinks about it. Listen, I preach the word. I teach the word more than I preach the word, but I teach the word. And I like to think that I do a pretty good job of it. But if I stand before God and he looks at me and he says to me, depart from me, you worker of iniquity, like the person that stood before him and tried to brag, I preached, I paid my tithe, I do this, and yet he still didn't make it in. Only God can determine our final destination. No one else has the right and can judge that. I'd like to think that my mama is in heaven, but I don't know that. I mean, I don't know that. I can't, if I had to bet my life on it, I wouldn't be able to do that because I don't know that. I suspect that. I don't have concrete fact. Other than what I believe, I have no real proof that that is in fact the case. And we got to stop giving people a false hope. It's okay to encourage them. It's okay to say, well, perhaps he's in a better place. I like that perhaps. But to say, even though you think with a strong conviction that that person is on there with God, you don't really know that. And unfortunately, it would be disappointing.
Well, Bishop, that's going to shake a lot of people up.
That's what I love doing. That's what I love doing best.
That's what's going to shake them up. Because
but it's truth. We don't, in churches don't teach and preach truth. We teach and preach what people want to hear. And we teach and preach it because we like popularity. We like to be accepted. When you understand who you are, you don't give a doggone whether people accept you or not. You understand that you are God's servant. His message is what's more important than me gaining popularity. I've been past that.
Well, his message is to be absent from the body, is to be present with God.
Is that his message? Is that his message?
Well, who else's message is it?
Is it God's message?
Who else's message is it? We're gonna get
or was that something that one of his writers was inspired?
He goes, okay, that's all. Coach, get in here. Come on, Coach. Come on, Coach.
Look, here's the bottom line. When my loved one passes, that statement does not comfort me regardless for the most people. You know what I mean? You're talking about I am missing them regardless. When my child goes away to college, I don't care if she went to U of M or she went to Hawaii, I'm still missing her. So number one, what I hear you saying is that is not the comforting that we're trying to give that loved one to cope with their own feelings of missing that person. If there's heaven or hell is not making the difference.
And if it's a guarantee, you can't
wait, hold on a sec. Wait.
Heaven or hell would make the difference for me because I would want to know. I'm going to be more upset. I'm already upset. But if you say that
I'm speaking, I'm saying
in general is what
in general, I'm still missing them. Look, I saw my mama with her angel wings in a dream. So I actually know mine is there. And then she came down and got some men that had broken my house and stopped them. And I saw the angels with wings again. And so I didn't know, but we can debate that another day.
Right.
So
what I'm saying is,
I haven't seen that for my mother, so I don't know.
I actually saw it, but here's what I really wanted to say, Dr. Smith. The aspect of letting someone have their emotions is so important. And I don't think that's the time for us to debate that person to try to get them to believe the person's in heaven or hell. Really, that's like not the point of trying to help them with the religiosity of the situation. Another side note. But one thing I learned, Dr. Karen, you're going to appreciate this. When I first learned how to help people through emotions in a workshop way back in the day in the early 90s, I remember they taught me not to hand someone a tissue. You know, I had a big group workshop, people start to cathartically share. And they were like, no, you do not run up and hand someone a box of tissue, because that is saying, don't cry, wipe your eyes.
Oh, you just closed the church down. No, we dismissed. Lord, may the Lord bless you till we meet again, because the church just been shut down when you said that. Because that's what they do.
We are to let people have their feelings.
Is running.
Yes, let them have their feelings. So what I see this beautiful journal doing is saying, now, Dr. Karen will get this too. We also, when we talk about cognitive behavioral aspects of it, we could sometimes prescribe people worry time, and then you're writing your worry list. Like there's a time to worry. And in our busy lives, there's unfortunately a time to grieve, because most of us, we got to take care of the kids. I got to go to work. I got to go do this, that, and the other. I've got to function. But what I hear your journal doing for us is saying, when I get home, I'm going to get that journal and I'm going to cry. And that's when I at least get to spend some quality time crying with nobody trying to interrupt me. That is my time.
Absolutely. For me, when my wife died, and to clarify what I just said a few minutes ago real quickly, it's nothing wrong with telling a person, be absent of the body and all that, but make sure that you preface it with what the passage is actually saying. Because if you tell a person that in the premises that had no real relationship with God, it's a lie. It's not true. So you don't do that. But anyway, I digress. When my wife died, while I watched her die, one of the coping things I need to sign from the journal is every single day at the same time, 7 o'clock, 7 is my number, I would have her mother come over to the house and relieve me for 1 hour. I would get in my car for that 1 hour. I would play William Murphy's song, He Reigns. I drive the city for 1 full hour. I pray and I cry. I pray and I cry. And I listen to that song over and over and over again. And I do that for a full hour. That song ministered to me. I had my daily time to say, I'm accepting this God. And my first moments were, I don't want my wife to die. And then that not wanting her to die turned into, I accept this, Lord, your will be done. And I think that was a Jesus moment. Jesus said, hey, if this problem, let this bitter cup pass. Nevertheless, they had that moment. And there are people now that's listening to this, I'm sure, who may very well have someone that's dying. They may have someone who's in hospice. They may have someone who is in the hospital with cancer dying at this moment. They need to find a way to cope with what they're going through. And that's the whole premise. No matter what you're going through, you got to deal with it.
Since we opened the controversial thing, let me just open the box all the way. And maybe this is a good part too for us. I'm going to open all the way because one of the reasons why I'm here, Dr. Smith, is Dr. Keith and I began talking about practicality at the pulpit and like really helping people know what to do versus only preaching at them or even teaching at them. And so I just want to lay this out here because this is about to be deep. And then I'm gonna get off. I'm gonna just hang up. Typically, when the preacher or the pastor is doing the funeral, 90% of that funeral is talking to the audience about life after death.
Absolutely.
As opposed to coping with the pain that you're in. And trust me, like I said, I want the comfort of that too. But then there are a lot of people sitting in the audience. We're trying to save souls at that moment. And we're not always, that's why they don't want to go to the funerals. Because they're like, they're just trying to do that as opposed to teaching me how to grieve with my mama who just died.
Well, there's a way to tie it all together though. And that's the thing about God is not one dimensional at all. Right. He's so multifaceted that he knows how to tie everything together and give you multiple things while you're thinking, I'm only gonna get one thing. That's the wisdom. and the knowledge of God. That's why the word tells us that we are supposed to not read the Bible. We're supposed to study the Bible. There's a difference between studying and reading it. And when we study the Bible, we get an opportunity to see the awesome God that we serve, who covers every single detail of life. There's nothing that we have ever faced. I don't waste my time trying to make folk happy, period. I've spent my time, if you go to my YouTube, all of my messages, and I think there's over 200 of them on there, they all start with how to do this, what to do about this. Every single one of them, because the objective of preaching the gospel is to impart and to improve the quality of life for the person that you're pouring into. Now, a lot of preachers don't have nothing to pour, so they can't. That's their problem. But you're supposed to get revelation knowledge from the word of God. So every time, listen, when and people say I'm arrogant, whatever, and maybe I am. But if I go to a church and preach, when I leave, they want me to come back, because most of the stuff I say they haven't heard. Or if they have heard it, they didn't understand it. And they didn't understand it, not because it's not there, it's because preachers don't have the opportunity to get into the word and get a revelation of the word. They want to get a sermon. There's difference. You can't get a sermon. You can't get a message. You need revelation. The coping manual, the things that we do in ministry through our psychologists and psychiatrists and life coaches, those are the things that we do to improve the quality of people's lives. That's what it's all about to me.
So, Coach, you open that can of worm, Coach. You open that can of worm, because there's a lot that we could, that's a whole nother topic that we cover when it comes to that, when you're in the service and you're preaching to the people. The practicality of a funeral is that it should be opposite. 10% should be how to deal with what's going on, but the other 90% is how to cope with after we've buried this person, after you don't call no more, nobody else is ringing the doorbell. What do? That should be the other part of it. But we reverse it for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but that's what most people do. But, that's why we're here, because we're here to tell you and help you cope with what you got to deal with. Bishop Smith is just saying, you know what? I don't have an antidote. I'm just telling you, got to cope with it. You can't get around it. That's it. You got to deal with it.
But, Doc, when you're talking about funerals, one of the problems with funerals, to me, from a minister standpoint, is people don't come to funerals to hear the word. They come to funeral to pay their last respects to the person that's laying there in front of them. So when you bring the word portion, unless there are people that love God and have a commitment to the word of God and revelation knowledge, they don't really care. Now, the problem that occurs too many times is we put preachers up who don't understand. The funeral is not a time for you to launch a revival.
Okay, I got it. Oh, you know what? They're telling me to. Okay, can I have 15 more minutes? They're gonna give me 15 more minutes. I'm gonna sit, because y'all got this so open wide. Can I?
Yes.
It's so
I didn't do that. Sister,
yeah,
Sister
you
Coach did that.
And listen, let me tell y'all something else. Dr. Karen's sitting there. She's hot. She got something she really want to say. So I gotta
look at her.
I know Dr. Michelle gotta go. God bless. I know you gotta get off and go into your other process.
Oh, yeah.
I want to keep going.
Yeah.
They're gonna give me more time. I'm waiting on telling them how much time that they're gonna give me. Dr. Karen, can you stay a few more minutes?
Yeah, just a few more minutes. I'm gonna see. I can look at my portal and see if I have a patient in there. So I'm good. I think that my whole piece, I got to go back to Dr. Smith, that I'm gonna be bothered if you're not reassuring me that my loved one. I'm talking about a loved one who has lived the life. I'm not talking about somebody else that's controversial. I'm trying to figure out if they did or not. That's a whole different piece. But I'm talking about the saint, the mother, the person. That's gonna be tough. You're gonna keep me up tonight. My mother better be in heaven.
But don't lose sleep over, because again, when I said that, I said in a general sense, not in the sense of in the sense of finality. Generally speaking, if it'll help you, I say to people the same thing. They're in a better place. I've said that. I'm guilty of saying that. And I've said the same things. So I'm saying in a general sense, it's okay. Don't lose any sleep over that.
Well, see, I don't mind the part about they're in a better place, because I think that's a terrible statement. I wouldn't want to hear that at all.
Yeah.
But if your statement, from all I've ever known since I was a kid to what I preach today, absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, and then you're saying, well, your mama might not be present with the Lord. Well, wait a minute.
But then you have to understand the realities. One, there are no absolutes, period. Except
in life, yeah.
In life.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you have to accept the fact that truth is truth, no matter whether it's easy or hard to accept or not. You know, I know a bishop, a very famous bishop, and I won't call his name.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And he has allegedly fallen from grace.
Mm-hmm.
Now, nobody but a few people know why he's fallen from grace. There have been widespread speculations. There's been different things about this and that and the other, why he fell from grace. But there are a few of us who know the real story. Now, here's the real reason why he fell from grace. The real reason, because his grandfather died and was not saved. That was an assumption based on his lifestyle. It was an assumption. We don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And in his mind, he could never reconcile himself to the fact that his grandfather could be possibly in hell.
Mm-hmm.
And he struggled with that for a long time until he found, and let me put this in a way, because if I say this, you're going to know.
Yeah, but you're going to give it away.
We already know.
Okay, I won't give it away.
We're already there.
But the point of it is, you know, I agree. To be absent of the body for the believer.
Wait, hold on a second. See, now you got controversial. I got to get,
right.
I'm not, because that's controversial. What does that scripture say? It doesn't. What does it talk about? You have to be a believer when it talks that. There's nothing in there saying you. It just says to be absent from the body.
Let's find the passage. Let's find the passage.
Yes. And I gotta go, y'all. I've got to pay. I hope you're recording this, because I need the answer to that, Dr. Smith. And thanks to Coach Kim.
Bye.
I
didn't start it. Dr. Smith started it. I just co-signed.
Open the can of worms. She opened the can of worms.
Kim is good for that.
I'll hang for a second.
And brought it to us. Thank you, guys. Good to be with you.
God bless. Nice meeting you.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
We got about, how much? I think I got about 6 minutes. So, Coach, when you talk about this, now let's talk this from a practicality, because your coaching service is not really, it's religious based, but it's not so engrafted in religion. How do you tell somebody that's going through grief and trying to cope to deal with this? You know, because we telling people to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. You know, they went Revelations talk about a place of no more pain. You'll see them again, all that kind of stuff going on. What are you going to tell them if that ain't the case?
Well, honestly, what I do is tell the story of my mom, and then you can infer what you want. You know what I mean? I literally say that my mother always wanted to have an amazing job, and she didn't feel like she had it on earth. And then when the bad people came into my house at 2:00 in the morning when I was living in New York, and I literally saw the angel come down, and she guided me and told me what to do. And then she actually that same weekend talked to my niece, like whispered something to my niece, and then also told my best friend. Long story short, I shared that story because I said, one thing I do know is my mother finally got the job that she really wanted. Like she got to have an important job. And I believe that she is watching over me. And I just say those things and they're like, wow, that really helped me to know that must mean my mama's okay, or my grandmother's okay, or my auntie is okay afterwards. So what I love about what Dr. Smith is doing is he is saying, this is how I get through it. And this is how I cope. And it might work for you. I don't think any of us should put our stuff on. Now, when we go to the funeral is the point. And I think you found your scripture. But when we go to the funeral, what we're hearing are some people want to hear the biblical truth that unless we didn't know and they were living a secret life, they have confessed and they are in heaven. And then some people are sitting there and they could care less about that. And they need to know that Jesus will comfort them through their pain. And then some are sitting there and they don't even believe in Jesus or heaven. And you are speaking to a big audience. And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, so we found the passage, and
Right.
it's in 2 Corinthians 5 for those who want to know it.
Yeah.
I won't read all of it because it's too much to read. So, but if you go down to verse number, let's start with verse number 4. Yeah, and verse number 4 says, "For we that are in this tabernacle do groan, being burdened, not for that which we would be unclothed, but clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up of life. Now he that hath wrote unto us for the selfsame thing is God, who also have given unto us the earnest of the Spirit. Therefore we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith and not by sight. We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Wherefore we labor that whether present or absent, we might be accepted of him." 1. So everything in the Bible was written to somebody. Not everything in the Bible was written to believers, and not everything was written to unbelievers. Much of the scripture that people think is written to unbelievers is actually written to believers. Paul spent more time straightening out the believers than he did unbelievers.
Yes,
Paul said, one of my favorite passages, he said, listen, it has been reported to me that there is sin among you that's not even named among the Gentiles. So he goes on. So this passage speaks to those who I believe are a part of the family of God, whose Spirit of God has been imparted to. And I say, if I'm going to use that, I'm going to use it in such a way that I make crystal clear that this is not talking to the person who is your quote unquote ranked sinner, backslider, unless they reclaim their position with Christ. So I would never say that to a person who, in my mind, there may be doubt. And it's not about judgment. It's about by their fruits, you know them. It's about the Bible never telling us that we cannot judge. That's another thing that we say. The Bible doesn't say you can't judge. It says, judge not wherewith you shall be judged. If I am a drunk, it is hypocritical for me to go to another drunk and say, you should stop drinking. You are a drunk. That's what that Bible speaks to. So where there is room for clarity in the statement that I made, I still hold my theme, but there is room for clarity. I do believe there's room for clarity. And I don't think it's a no, never, never, never say it. I think it's a thing that it has to be qualified to me. And I like qualifying things. I don't like to say, this is everybody. All y'all got this, because all y'all don't have that. And excuse us for splitting the verb, but.
Gotcha. So then it comes back to where we are with practicality.
It just comes to say that when I'm sitting in the seat grieving, or when 10 of us are sitting in the seat grieving, that one sentence can mean so many things to different people.
Exactly.
And so the compassion, the empathy, the teaching, the preaching, the comforting, there's got to be awareness of everybody sitting in that space. And there's not always, is all we're saying. There often is, and not always.
And I like what he said. He said, it's the confidence that we have. So when my mom died, there was no reason whatsoever for me to not let that passage be true of her, even though technically I didn't know, because my mother did so much for the kingdom. My mother was in the house with 4 other people, my dad, my 3 brothers and I. None of us were saved except my mom. We used to wake up every morning with an oil cross on our foreheads. And you could walk around the little house we stayed in, and the door was already oiled with crosses. And you know what happened? Because of my mom, over a stretch of about 15 years, every single person in that house got saved. My dad got saved before he died. My older brother was the first to get saved. I was the second. My younger brother was the third. My dad was last. And when my mother died, she was still getting phone calls every day from people that said, would you please pray for me?
She was a praying woman. Thank you,
As
Bishop.
a business coach, I think your booklet, your coping journal should be passed out at funerals. That's all I'm gonna say to it.
You know what? Thank you, prophetess. we have been promoting it to some of the funeral homes, and I've been giving it to funeral homes at a special discounted price, so that they could give them to people. I mean, it sold over 100 copies before it even hit Amazon, and it happened the week it came out. A close friend of mine lost her nephew to a tragic death. And she was telling me how she felt about it. I said, I'm going to bring you one of my journals over free. So I took it to her and she called me back. She said, I need about 30 of those.
Wow.
Yeah, so I gave her half, and the other half I sold to her at an extreme discount. So
people can get your book on Amazon.
Get on Amazon.
By putting in your name, Dr. or Bishop?
It's under Dr. Willard L. Smith, I think, but it'll pop up. It's on there with all the rest of my books.
Okay, Dr. Willard L. Smith, thank you, sir, for being with us. Coach, you got the last 3 minutes. What you gonna tell us?
Just wanted to say, and we can talk about it later, but grief is not always from the death of loved ones. It could be from losing something going on in your physical body. It could be losing a job, knowing you're never going to have the kid that you wanted, knowing that, you're divorced, and now so many aspects of grief. And I believe you can take yourself through that same process with all of those circumstances.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Coach. How can people reach you? At
Coach Kim Betty or KimBetty.com, or right here on the Thursdays with Dr. Keith.
Okay, this has been a hot topic.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, sir, for being with us. And thank you, Coach, and my other host that had to go. Not often do you get topics that are kind of difficult, but this is a topic that we really can't give you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 antidote. But we can tell you that you can cope with the things that you need to cope with, whether it's in death or it's in life situations. There's nothing too hard for you that you cannot cope, that you got to give up and take your own life or commit anything. Life is about coping with different streams of different situations. I just want to encourage you to continue watching WCEG Radio, continue listening to us. If you need to Coach Kim, you can get to her. She's absolutely one of the best in the industry. She'll bless your heart. Your life will be blessed for her. Listen, tune in next week after next. We're going to be talking about some more stuff, and it's domestic violence week. And I just want to take this time to say that if you're in a domestic violence relationship, run. Get out of it. I'm not going to tell you if you've been married 45 years and there's something domestic, whether it's verbal or physical, that's not where you need to be. Get out of it. I said it right here. Yeah, I said it. Get out of it, because you need to be whole, and you can't be whole if you're imbalanced in that type of relationship. Until next time, we'll see you on It's a New Day.
Thank you, Bishop. God bless.
Bless you all. Take care. Thank you. See you next time. Peace.